Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Adam Sikorsky, and I am the Regional Vice President of our CAMS Charlotte region. Today, we are excited to talk about a topic that's both important and sometimes overlooked in community management, and that's the community's trees. We'll be discussing the 5 secrets that arborists want you to know before it is too late. We are fortunate to have Eric Schmidhausler with Bartlett Tree Experts with us today, and Eric will share his expertise on how to plan for the health and safety of your community's trees and what boards should keep in mind when it comes to long-term planning. Before we get started, a quick reminder, all of our webinars are recorded. In fact, we have about 5 years worth of sessions, and they are available anytime at camsmgt.com under the board member resource section. Along with past webinars, you will also find a variety of other educational materials there that we encourage you to take advantage of. As we go through today's session, if you have any questions, please make note of them down in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and we will address those once we get to the question and answer portion at the end of the session. With that, let's jump in and get started. Eric, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate it. And thank you. Good evening, everybody, or afternoon. And thanks for joining on this webinar. We're excited to talk about trees. I'm going to cover a handful of topics, hopefully exciting and hopefully topics that you are here to learn about. I am Eric Schmidhausler, as Adam said, and I am a certified arborist with Bartlett Tree Experts, and I hold a credential as track qualified, so able to do tree risk assessments. Already. There we go. Bartlett Tree Experts, I'm going to spend a minute talking about our company. We are a privately owned company that's been around since 1907. We are the leader in residential tree care. Our motto is safety above all else, and we believe that the importance of safety in tree care is paramount to this industry. We do have offices in 43 states, Canada, the United Kingdom. We like to feel like a small company, not a big company, and because we're privately owned by the Bartlett family, we get to act like small company. Our local Charlotte office here, we have 9 arborists like myself, and we have over 400 arborists across the country. Our national research headquarters is here in Charlotte. We get to do all of our sciencey stuff right here in our backyard on 350 beautiful acres of research. I've been with Bartlett since 2014. Previous to my career in arboriculture, I was 15 years in commercial landscaping. Here's a map of where Bartlett is. You can see East Coast. We were founded in Stamford, Connecticut, way back 1907. West Coast expansion the last 20 years. We've had heavy Canadian expansion, and we also purchased a company about 25 years ago in the United Kingdom. So we have offices overseas, which is kind of interesting. Here's a small map of our Carolinas presence. We have 10 offices spanning North and South Carolina, going right from the I-40 corridor to the mountains, upstate of South Carolina, the beach country, down in South Carolina, and then the North Carolina coast, and then right here in Charlotte. So I'm excited to talk about this topic tonight, but first we're going to define what an arborist is. The term arborist, a specialist in the care and maintenance of trees, and this definition dates back to 1755. But even more interesting is this definition here: a specialist in the cultivation and care of trees and shrubs, including tree surgery, diagnosis, treatment, prevention of tree disease, and control of pests. And this dates back to well into the 1500s, 1570, 1580s. So tree care has been around for centuries, and we're thankful that we get to continue that in our urban settings, most of our offices. We're going to discuss 5 must-dos tonight for tree care and how to keep your trees looking great all year long. We're going to talk about fertilization first. We're going to talk about root collar issues, tree structure, pest management, and then we're going to talk about annual property visits. So I guess I call myself a tree doctor. We'll move into fertilizer first. And fertilizer, vital nutrients are critical for our trees. And we have many types of soils. We have hard soils, clay soils, compacted soils. We have soils that hold nutrients, soils that don't hold nutrients very well. So understanding our soil type is probably first. Our office is out at the coast because they have sandy soils. They fertilize twice a year because the nutrient cation exchange doesn't hold the fertilizer particle very well. And up in our clay soils, we fertilize once a year because the nutrients stay in the soil longer. So understanding your soil type is probably first, and then understanding what type of fertilizer you're going to use and how you're going to apply it. Granular fertilizer, similar to your turf fertilizer, will lay on the soil and dissolve over time and slowly break down. There's a soil drench, which is where we'll basically wand soil on top of the ground as you would with a hose. And then there's a deep root injection. And a deep root injection is a probe that goes into the ground and releases the fertilizer down at the feeder roots, which is a very effective way to fertilize, but sometimes it's not the most effective depending on your soil type. Taking soil samples are critical for understanding what your soil profile is. And a note here that healthy trees compartmentalize decay better. So healthier trees are healthy, kind of like you and I. If we're healthier, we work out, we jog, we eat right, we're usually healthier. And if we don't, we're not. So we like to keep trees healthy, and fertilization is a key to that. We're more concerned about root growth than crown growth. We don't need a tree to grow tall fast. We need a tree to have good roots. We're going to discuss kind of what good trees look like. You see that on the left, we have some small shrubs, and the ones on the left with the circle are almost yellowy, and the trees on the right, the multi-stem trees on the right, they're very yellowy. Those are trees that we could easily determine are probably nutrient deficient. Why? We don't know. That's going to require some sort of sampling and test. Our soil test, I'll take my pointer here. Our soil test, we have macro elements: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And these top three, these are found in your turf fertilizer. And most people say, well, my trees don't need special fertilizer because I fertilize my lawn every year. Well, that's great. But your turf fertilizer, NPK, is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And those are great for the tree, but that's like taking basic vitamins. Trees really need what we call micronutrients, and sulfur, calcium, magnesium, iron, manganese, boron, copper, zinc, molybdenum. Those are all critical to the health of a tree, just as much as nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. So a good tree fertilizer includes the microelements as much as the macro elements. At Bartlett, we have different blends of fertilizer for different parts of the country. We have years and years and years of data where we know what fertilizers are better for what soil types. There are some natural fertilizers as well that we should be using and can be using. Decaying leaves and mulch, fresh wood chips are great for your tree. Wood chips, pine bark mulch, hardwood mulch, cedar mulch, pine needles, anything that's natural is going to be great for your tree. It really is. Poor choices for mulch are ground rubber, rocks, or lava or river stone. Those are not very healthy for your tree, and we highly advise using against those for your trees. But if you can't afford fertilizer, add any of those, because when they break down, they provide organic matter, which is going to give food for the tree. So good chips are good. And here's a couple examples of decaying matter, decaying leaves, a good mulch ring around that bottom tree there, and poor mulch options. Please don't use ground rubber. We don't advise that. Changes the pH of the soil. Our next topic we're going to cover is root collar issues. And you say, what is a root collar? Well, we're going to get there in just a second. Root collars, roots come in different, trees come in different forms when you purchase them. They come in container, balled and burlapped, and bare root. And we have a lot of problems when we plant a tree, and the problem usually occurs when the tree is planted. It's either too deep, over mulched. It's the root ball is not prepared very well. There's what's called girdling roots. We'll get into that in a second. And then there's planting materials and leaving the wire strap on. But a good root collar, this is going to show you, this is exactly how we want to see a tree. This is nature. An acorn falls, and I don't think squirrels have shovels. Squirrels don't have shovels and dig holes and plant the seed way down 10 inches in the ground. acorn lays on top of the ground and roots naturally, and that's where the root collar, and the root collar is where the buttress root, which is right here, this is the buttress root, and this is the stem of the tree, and the root collar is this zone right through here, and we want to see that exposed on every tree. So proper planting, I said, when the tree goes in the ground, we want to know that it's planted correctly. Right size hole, it gets watered, it's going to grow and become a healthy tree. We touched early on soil types. Up in the Piedmont, the mountains of North Carolina, you've probably got great loamy soil that's easy to dig in, relatively easy to dig in. People that are down at the coast, you've got sand, which almost feels like cheating because it's so easy to dig in the sand. But we also have in the good old most of the Carolinas, we're going to have this awful clay soil that is an absolute bear to dig into and dig a hole for a tree. So understanding our soil types. I'm going to go over now a diagram here on how to properly plant your tree, and there's a lot of information in this one diagram. I'm just going to focus on a couple of the items here. The first one is the planting hole, 2 to 3 times the root ball diameter. We want a wide hole. You can see this tree. Here's the edge of the root ball here and here, right there and right there. This is the edge of the root ball. And this extra over here, this is all backfill, loose backfill for the roots to begin to grow. If we're not digging a wide enough hole, we're going to cause a problem right from the start. The next thing we want to do is make sure that the bottom of the root ball is on firm soil. If we don't pack the bottom of our hole very well, the tree is what's going to cause slump and it's going to sink. And over time, this nice level with ground is going to sink down and be a couple inches low, and that's going to cause a problem for us. We want to cut roots that are circling the container. Our next slide is going to show us what circling roots look like and what that could cause. We want to backfill the hole with original soil. We don't want to create a false soil profile and just go dig out all the bad clay, and put in perfect right from your garden center topsoil. We actually want to blend it together. So this is a mix. This soil out here, this is a mix of your native soils that you're digging out and a blend with some organic material. And then we talked about at the top of the root ball with ground level with the ground. This is the root collar right here, and you see where it is level with the ground. It's not below the ground, it's not sitting significantly above the ground, it is just level with the ground. So this is a great diagram for how to plant a tree. So the three different types of tree that we can purchase from a nursery or a vendor or a garden center. We have your traditional container tree. This tree grows it's called stepped up. So it starts out in a real small container and gets moved up to larger. A 1 gallon will go to a 3 or 7 gallon, and then that'll become a 15 gallon and then potentially a 30 gallon. So that tree lives with its roots its entire life, never loses its roots. Versus the balled and burlap tree, this tree loses almost 50 to 70% of its roots when it's harvested, because if you can envision, this tree here had roots that went out this far, little fibrous feeder roots, and when this tree was harvested, those roots were cut right here. So it loses its roots. So recovery for a balled and burlap takes a little bit more time, but it has a greater, denser root system, but just less of those roots. And then we have what we call a bare root. You would order these online. If you've ever ordered trees off of the Arbor Day Foundation, they're probably going to send you a bare root tree that has roots exposed. And that's another way. So with these three, what we don't know sometimes when we purchase at the garden center is that we have to inspect the roots. Most of the time, this circling root system is covered. It's covered and hidden, and we don't really see this until we get home and we start planting the tree. Here are some problems with girdling roots, and when we come out to inspect your tree, we immediately are going to look right at the roots. You're going to point up and you're going to say, well, my problem is up there in the tree, and we're going to look down at the ground. And you're going to say, yeah, but are you listening to me? I'm pointing up here, and there's a problem with the top of my tree, and we're going to look right at the ground level of the tree, because that's where the problems with trees start. This is a example of bleeding cankers in a buried root collar, too much soil and mulch against that root collar. This is something that you may see and not really think that this is a big deal. But again, these problems to the untrained eye, you'll walk right past them because you look at the beautiful leaves of the tree or the beautiful fall color, and you're not truly inspecting your tree. Because when we come in and remove all of this excess soil, this is potentially what we see. It's kind of like an x-ray of the ground. We can't see it with the soil on top of it, but once we use high pressure air to remove all the soil, we can see what's really happening. And what we'll probably end up doing is recommending removal of about 20% of these fibrous roots. The roots should be growing way out here, and they should not be circling around the tree. And this is a tree that is probably 8 to 10 years old, and probably at year 15 or 16, it's probably going to look awful. And then by year 20, it's probably going to die. So our goal is to catch this soon enough that we don't run into those problems. Mulching is another common problem. There is something called volcano mulching. Volcano mulching on the left here. This is way too much mulch. Way too much mulch. We do not want that. Red is bad. Too much mulch is bad for your tree. What we would much rather see is the visible root collar or root flare, like we've talked about a few times. This visible root flare, you've got a nice 2 inches of mulch out here at the drip line of the tree, and then this is again too much mulch. Got to excavate it. Got to cut the. Need to remove all that mulch. Topic number 3, we're going to talk about tree structure. Why pruning isn't just for looks and how it can help prevent storm damage. If any of you are parents, I talk about many times the most important tree to take care of is your teenage tree. The younger trees, the trees that are 5 years old, 10 years old, those don't require a lot of attention. They're young trees. When you get into teenage years, 15 to almost 23 years old, if you've got 15, 16-year-old kids at home, you'll know that those are hard to care for, and they need a lot of attention, a lot more attention, believe it or not. So the trees in that older teenage, younger 20s year, those are the focal trees to go after. Pruning is critical. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Be proactive. Make small cuts. Prune your trees. I have a slide coming up in a second that is going to show us kind of what a properly pruned tree looks like. We follow what's called ANSI standards here. ANSI standards, ANSI 300, A300 is the International Society of Arboriculture language to properly prune trees. We don't cut trees. We don't top trees. We don't trim trees. We reduce limb length. We remove dead limbs. We reduce weight at branch ends. And it's an entire language our industry has, and the people that are educated in the industry know how to speak that language. Here is a fantastic example, and this comes from the Friends of the Urban Forest. These are roughly the same trees, family A and family B. Family A, this tree was not pruned when it was young, and this tree was pruned when it was young. Same tree, starting with the same tree here, and you could see that a handful of cuts were made on this little young tree, that it doesn't look as bushy as this one. And then in 3 to 4 years, we now have a slightly healthier looking tree, where this tree was not trimmed and looking lots of suckers at the base, lots of low limbs, lots of fork, lots of codominant leaders here. After 5 to 7 years, this tree is looking like a great looking tree. This tree is not looking any better. And now we have a 15-year-old tree that grew because we spent time here at planting and in year 3 to 4 versus having this tree at year 15. I think we look at those two trees very easily and say, I want the right tree. And that comes with early young tree pruning. And young tree pruning could take as little as an hour. It does not take very long. If you're not pruning your trees at a young age, you get what's called codominant branches and stems. This is a multi-stem tree. We know that this is a weakness. This is a codominant stem, which means that that limb is almost the size of the main trunk of the tree. And when these fall within a certain ratio, we can no longer cut that. But we also know that this limb is more than likely a limb that's going to fail over your driveway, fail over your backyard, fail over your picnic table. But this is what we try to address when that tree is at a young age. So you can see here, we look at codominant stems and poorly attached branches. Right, red is the undesirable. We want to see that go away over time, and the yellow limb is going to be the center of the tree that we really want to focus on and become the strong part. And when we don't address the red limb, this is what happens. The codominant limb fails. And this is what we can predict. When we come out to inspect a tree, we look for this. Topic number 4, we're going to talk about pest management right now. There are what's eating your tree from inside and out, and eating is not always a bug, but there are secondary stressors most of the time that are causing the tree issue. Pests and diseases usually stem from an unhealthy tree, and pests are usually easier to control than diseases. Diseases are harder to control and usually take more time. A pest we can eradicate sometimes fairly easily. There is a pest that is difficult to eradicate, and it's the emerald ash borer. And we're going to talk a little bit about the emerald ash borer here shortly. So we have, this is a boring beetle. This may be boring into your pine trees, southern pine beetle. It could be a beetle that is an ambrosia beetle that's going after sick trees. These are scale insects. And these are usually pretty easy to control with the right sort of insecticide that we can spray. And our insecticides are healthy for bees and pollinators. And then you get the good old caterpillars. Those good old caterpillars are just going to munch the leaves. And we have a handful of cycles. Those of you that have been around the center of the Carolinas, Charlotte had it for a long time. Greenville had it for a bit of time. The cankerworm moved up into Raleigh-Durham area for several years, but it was a very isolated pest, and that's when you saw all the black bands around the trees to catch the cankerworm. But the control for a decade was aggressive, and the insect is almost gone. But we do have orange stripe oakworm that are going to munch leaves in the late summer, usually an August pest. We've got some other elm leaf beetles, the zigzag elm beetle. So there's a handful out there that are going to chew your trees. We look at foliage that gets eaten early in the season as a big problem, and we want to control that problem because that leaf is the year's worth of food. And if the tree loses its leaves in March, April, or May, that tree loses the opportunity to make food. If a tree loses its leaves or gets munched on by a caterpillar in August, September, the tree is going to lose its leaves anyhow shortly. So it's less of an issue. So we like to identify what the pest is, the timing, and the best control method. Some pests we can control almost a year in advance. One of the pests that we see incredibly common throughout the Carolinas is gloomy scale. And gloomy scale is found on maple trees, and it is an armored scale. So here's a little example of what the gloomy scale looks like. These little tiny pimples, bumps on the twig of a tree. There's also some other scale in this picture, but the little black bumps. And gloomy scale is a sucking insect, so it's going to suck the nutrients out of the tree. Sometimes it'll turn the entire stem of the tree black because those little black armored shells cover the tree. But what happens is the tree ends up looking like this, where we see all this dieback in the crown of the tree, and this dieback is just from a sucking insect. If you ask me if the tree was dead, the tree is not dead, but the tree has lost so much nutrients because the gloomy scale is sucking the nutrients out of these outer limbs of the tree. You'll see limbs raining down out of the crown of the tree. Usually little tiny limbs, little feeder limbs at the end, the tips of the branches, but they're all dying because they have no energy, and they've been sucked on by the gloomy scale. And there's a plan. There's a control method for this. There's some natural control methods. There's some insecticide control methods, but it's all able to be solved. But the reason we see such a prolific amount of gloomy scale in the Carolinas is because we continue to plant maple trees in hot parking lots with no irrigation, surrounded by asphalt, surrounded by concrete, and we want a tree that does not survive very well in those environments. NC State did a study several years ago of maple trees and where they were planted, and the majority of the trees were planted in heavy urban environments with heavy environmental stress, heat, drought, poor soil, parking lots, reflective heat. They have gloomy scale and they need to be treated. But the maple tree in your beautiful front yard that's irrigated and turf and fertilized, it unlikely has as much gloomy scale. So it's a prolific insect for us, and one that we're continually working on controlling. But it's a real problem for us. The next one we're going to talk about is ambrosia beetles. Ambrosia beetles, they impact stressed trees. And what happens is a tree releases a pheromone. So if a tree gets struck by lightning, it will release a pheromone, and that pheromone will invite the ambrosia beetle to come to the tree, and it will fly past every healthy tree. Every healthy tree, it'll fly right past that and go to the tree, letting out the pheromone, because the insect knows that that tree is under stress. So what we can do is, if a tree gets struck by lightning and it's not terribly damaged or damaged at all, we can apply an insecticide on the stem of the tree, basically that the ambrosia beetle would die when it comes and lands on the stem of the tree. And if we can control that for about 60 to 90 days until that tree stops letting off the pheromone, the ambrosia beetles are going to go somewhere else, and we're going to save the tree. Other reasons that we see ambrosia beetles are compacted soils around the base of the tree. If there's compacted soils and the tree isn't taking up nutrients and water very well, we'll see the tree suddenly let off the pheromone. And what ends up happening is we see this, and these are called frass pencils, and this is actually sawdust from the tree. So the ambrosia beetle bores into the tree and then eats all of the pulp of the tree, and then the enzyme that is in the ambrosia beetle pushes this out, this frass pencil, and it'll look like this. And then what's going to happen is this is just going to fall off and lay at the base of the tree. So you're going to find a really fine powder at the base of the tree. So when we walk up to a stressed tree to inspect the tree, one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to look for frass and ambrosia beetle damage. These are big indicators for us that the tree is under stress. Sometimes it's too late, and sometimes it's not too late. But once a tree has ambrosia beetles, treating the beetle when it's in the tree is very difficult to do. We can really only effectively control the insect when it's entering or exiting the tree. The third insect we're going to talk about from pest management is one that is dominating the Carolinas, and it has run roughshod through the upper Midwest and Northeast. Very unfortunate. It's called the emerald ash borer, and the emerald ash borer has been found in this entire area, part of the country. Now, the emerald ash borer came in on a shipping container through a canal. And went through this way up to the Great Lakes, and it came on some pallets from, I believe, the Orient, and they were in some wood. And then what happened was, when in Erie, the ships were unloaded, and then the wooden pallets had emerald ash borer on them. And this is what the insect looks like. It's a beautiful emerald color, beautiful insect, and this is the larva that's in the tree. But it is indiscriminately going after ash trees, and it has worked its way from Erie all the way down the East Coast up into the Northeast. We now have it down in the Southeast, and it has gone west. The reason it is such a problem is because when it bores into the tree, it affects the structural integrity of the tree by feeding underneath the bark. We identify it because it has a very, very specific shaped D-shaped hole. If you kind of turn your head and look at this, this looks like the letter D. So a D-shaped hole, we know that that's an emerald ash borer, and there's no other insect that has an exit hole that looks like this. So what happens is it bores into the tree, and then it chews these galleries here, chews them all throughout the tree, and this is under the bark, and you usually don't notice it. And then it lays its larvae, and then the larvae hatches, and then the larvae then goes and then tunnels and channels into the galleries. And what happens is we have no structural integrity in the tree, so our climbers can no longer climb a tree that has emerald ash borer damage. And we're talking about crane removals, because it's unsafe to put anybody in the crown of the tree. So it's a huge concern. It's a big pest for us. And if you're in an area, ash trees in the Northeast were planted as street trees, beautiful street trees, and were becoming so hazardous that entire towns up in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and the Northeast, they were cutting every ash tree down to start over because they needed a better species of tree. It's treatable. There's an injection that we can do in the base of the tree, and it lasts for 2 years. And it's incredibly effective. There's probably a 92 to 95% efficacy rate when we inject a tree for an emerald ash borer. So the insect will lay its larva, and when the larvae hatch, they end up eating the insecticide in the tree tissue, and then they die. And we can preserve a tree, but it's perpetual. And you have to measure the cost of injecting a tree that could cost anywhere between $300 and $700 every 2 years. And how long do you want to do that for if you want to save your ash tree? But Bartlett has been at the forefront since probably 15 years ago, when an emerald ash borer came into the country, of researching and finding the right product to control it. We've got a handful of partners we work with, but we feel very, very good about our control methods. So it's something to consider if you have some ash trees that you're concerned about. The last topic we're going to get into is annual inspections. And annual inspections are really important for our landscape and to inspect our trees and to have a certified arborist come out and perform the inspection. Annual inspections are not just how green are the leaves. Annual inspections involve a lot. And sometimes we don't recognize what actually needs to be inspected. We had a client recently that had some ligustrums, an incredibly hardy plant, and they were declining. We couldn't figure out why they were declining. And he said, well, a couple of years ago, they built a neighborhood behind us. And all of a sudden we realized that the drainage pattern from the new neighborhood was moving water a different direction. And now the bed that these ligustrum were planted in was now soaked with water. So we have ever-changing landscape. No tree or plant stays the same. It grows. It's a living organism. Environmental stressors. We've had drought. I don't know where in the Carolinas you are, but we haven't seen rain in a solid month and a half. Before that, we saw an incredible amount of rain that we almost couldn't get any work done for a month. So drought, excessive rainfall, heat. It was well over 105, 110 heat index for the month of July. It was a rough month. And then we have changing temperatures, and then site activity, which I mentioned. Construction damage, different drainage, new landscaping, neighboring properties. So that's why you should do an annual inspection. And we're going to cover, to finish up here, for the next few minutes, we're going to talk about proper inspection of trees and shrubs. First thing we do when we walk onto a property is we inspect the root flare of the tree. If you've ever been to the doctor, the first thing they do is take your temperature. And you look at the doctor and you say, but I don't have a fever. But that's just the benchmark. And then they take your blood pressure. And then you tell them, hey, I don't have high blood pressure. My blood pressure is perfect. And the doctor says, this is just the benchmark. Our benchmark as tree doctors is to walk onto your property and inspect the root flare. And we're looking for some of the things that I've already mentioned. We're looking for girdling roots, buried root collars, bleeding cankers, things that are going to immediately dictate or indicate the health of a tree. because we know that if the crown of the tree, the top of the tree is struggling, it's probably coming from the root flare. So that's the first thing we're going to inspect. And sometimes we can't inspect it properly. We need some tools and equipment to expose the root flare. We'll find small decay pockets here. And then we also have to know what species of tree it is. There are some species of trees that grow really fast and are very prone to insects or very prone to disease or very prone to root rot. And then there's other trees that compartmentalize. White oaks live to 200, 250 years old. The angel oak, they live as long as they live because that's a good compartmentalizer species of oak tree. Then there's tulip poplars, which grow incredibly fast, but they aren't great compartmentalizers. Sweet gum, as much as we hate them, that is a fast-growing tree with soft wood, and they don't compartmentalize decay very well. So we want to know what the species of the tree is, as well as all the environmental conditions, and we're going to look at the root flare. And we're also going to look at the leaves and twigs. We're going to inspect what's going on with the tree. Are there insects? Are there bugs? Are there lesions? Boxwood blight on your boxwoods. To inspect and look for boxwood blight, we see that the foliage of the boxwood is browning, but we have to look really closely with a hand lens and see if there's any lesions on the stems of the tree. And if there's lesions, we know that we want to get that inspected with our microscopes and look for what's causing the lesions. So not just the stem of the tree, but we're also going to look at the leaves and twigs. So when to call an arborist? There's 6 tree warning signs that you should know about. And first, we're going to talk about dead and broken branches. I think we all can agree that this tree has dead and broken branches. If this tree is in the middle of your horse pasture and there's horses under it, we have to determine the value of the horse. And if a limb were to fall on the horse, just like we would want to measure the value of our car, our children, our home, if these limbs break in a storm, they could cause a problem. In this particular picture, they're going to fall on the fence. Is that a problem? Well, if your prized cow or your prized horse or your prized dogs are in this pasture and that fence breaks, your animals could get out. So suddenly we look at why we're pruning a tree very differently and what's the reason. So we want to understand the reason to prune the tree. But I think we all can agree that this tree has dead limbs and needs to be pruned. And those trees removed. And there may be, depending on the species of the tree and the location of the tree, we may look at this tree and recommend it for full removal. Or there may be a reason that we can't remove the tree. So this is just probably an extreme indicator of dead limbs in a tree. Probably going to remove the tree, but maybe not. The second reason to call an arborist is if you have a leaning tree. We see trees that lean. What we don't know when we inspect a tree, just because it's leaning, this tree is probably going to cause everyone to panic and say, oh my gosh, the tree is leaning. But what is very interesting is this vertical limb right here. If we look at the diameter of that vertical limb, that limb appears to have been growing because of its diameter and ratio to the stem of the tree. That limb right there appears to have been growing for probably the past 10 years. So we can safely say that this tree has been leaning for 10 years. Does it make it a safe tree? No, it doesn't. But does it make it a failing tree? I don't think it makes it a failing tree. I think we need to understand more of the condition. Is there a creek over here? Did it flood? Did this tree start to heave a little bit? But that limb right there is what we're going to note when we look at a leaning tree and say, that tree's been leaning for a long time. I promise you, long, long time. But I do think we all can agree that this tree has not been leaning for a long time. We can see that the ground is heaved up right here, and we can see that it's not clear over the sidewalk, and it's probably leaning on a house. This probably is a street tree that fell over in a storm, and it's safe to say that this leaning tree is one we absolutely should remove if it's not already laying on the house. Trees with multiple trunks are they're a concern for us. Multiple trunks, probably this tree was run over by a mower when it was really young, and that single stem was cut and then it became multiple stems. So multiple stems, we have poor unions right here. We have places where decay may occur. We always are concerned about trees with multiple trunks. Can we prune this tree to make one dominant stem? Can we remove these two and just have this one on the right? Possibly. All depends on species, all depends on size of crown of tree. But we know that trees with multiple trunks really should be inspected. There's also trees that have weak branch unions, and we have two different kinds of branch unions that we really want to look at. This particular branch union is an open Y type union, and if you look, we've created the letter Y here. And this union is really healthy. And then we have what we call a deep V union, and this union right here is more of a V. And when we see V unions, we know that there is a weakness that runs down here past my pointer. It probably is down here lower in the tree, but this is a weakness in the tree. And kind of like one of the earlier slides we showed about the limb that failed off to the left side of the tree because it was a codominant, this is unhealthy. And we have to make a decision. We have to make a decision. We see this a lot with pear trees, sweet gum, maple. They all grow with this deep V union. There's a lot of species of American elm trees that grow with this, where we really want a species that's going to have a nice Y or prune it. So we would probably slow growth down of this limb over here on the left-hand side and encourage growth here, but we really don't know what's happening right in that spot. So weak branch unions are certainly something to take note of and figure out how to mitigate that problem. And the fifth one, yep. So there's good and there's bad. So if you want to inspect your trees and look at it, I think you'll be able to tell, and then again have a professional arborist come out and look at it a little bit better. Because what happens is it fails. This limb ends up here failing, and this is what we end up seeing. That black part right there is really this part right here where the two stems are touching. The right stem and the left stem are touching each other. There's no wood tissue that travels between the two. So what happens is you've got this black decay pocket, and that black decay pocket is where your limb fails. And that's, again, we see it in pear trees a lot, sweet gum, tulip poplar, and maple trees. Trunk of branch cracks. We know that this right here, this is a vertical crack in a stem. This is a two-stem tree. We know that two-stem trees with deep V's are issues and problems, and there's a weakness here, and we could get a storm where actually opens this up and this tree is actively failing. There's a couple options here. We could put some bracing rods here to hold the tree together, but more than likely the tree is going to be recommended for removal. So, and the last thing when you should call an arborist to inspect your tree is mushrooms. And we're not talking about shiitake or button mushrooms that you cook with. We are talking about fungal fruiting conchs. This mushroom right here, this fungal fruiting conch, that's an indicator that there's an issue with the tree. This is a bleeding canker, and there's the start of a mushroom right down here on the right. Both those areas. We know that mushrooms and fungal conchs grow on decaying matter. So when matter decays, mushrooms grow. And those are indicators. There's a good chance that this stem at the tree at the bottom, there's a good chance that this root right here is almost non-existent and being compromised by a mushroom that's growing on decaying matter. So this root may be decaying, and this tree with a mild to normal wind, not even storm wind, but mild to normal winds, this tree potentially fails because it has a mushroom. So there are dozens and dozens types of mushrooms, some that are very aggressive. There's brown rot, there's white rot, and there's different kinds of rot. So having someone come out and understand what kind of rot is in your tree how fast and aggressively it travels through the tree, and again, what species of the tree it is. We talked earlier about trees compartmentalizing decay and being healthy compartmentalizers. If we know we have a species, if we see this on a white oak, I am probably less concerned than if I see this on a maple tree. And then we have some other mushrooms that are just a large plethora of growth, and that's just an indicator that the stem of the tree has a lot of decay on it. So that is your 6 reasons when to call an arborist. If you see any of these things, dead or broken branches, leaning trees, multiple trunks, weak branch unions, a crack in your tree, or mushrooms, we want you to call an arborist and have your trees inspected. I hope that I didn't speak too fast. I hope I covered a lot of information, and I hope it was all good information. And I think this is the time, Adam, that we'll open it up for some questions that people may have submitted.
Absolutely. And we do have some questions in chat, so I'll kind of organize these together for you. Um, we will start with, can protruding roots on our hiking trails be painted for safety reasons?
Absolutely. No reason to not paint it. We don't want you to paint it with old-fashioned pruning wound, tar, or anything like that. But painting a root, I'm much happier seeing a root painted than I am covered with gravel.
Great. Um, how do you take care of a co-dominant limb?
Yeah, so codominant limbs, there's a couple different ways to deal with it. We want to remove the codominant limb, but sometimes just removing the limb at the stem of the tree is not really the best cut to make. So if you think about a tree, if this is the codominant limb and this is the main trunk, and the tree is putting equal amounts of energy into both of these parts of the tree, if I take this codominant limb and reduce it by half, the tree is going to put half of its energy over here and going to put the other 50% into the crown of the tree. And then if I take 50% more off of this codominant stem and take a little bit more off of it, now the tree is barely putting any energy out here and putting more energy into the crown of the tree, in the upper crown of the tree. So usually within somewhere between 2 to 5 years, we can completely remove the codominant stem and just have one central leader. But oftentimes we want to remove that codominant limb and just make the cut and make the big cut. And we really need to think about the overall health of the tree, how much we're cutting, what percent of the tree we're cutting, and usually it could be managed on a high level. It can be managed in 2 to 5 years. In a commercial level, maybe it's done in 2 to 3 years with a little bit more of an aggressive cut. But it could be tragic visually. You come home and go, "Oh my gosh, I told them to remove the codominant stem, and now I'm missing a third of the crown of my tree, and now it looks terrible." Long term, it's going to recover, but usually we want to do it in a couple different minor pruning stages. Good question.
Great, thank you. On an additional pruning question, is there a way to stop crepe myrtle trees from generating shoots at the base of the tree?
Uh, so more than likely, the crepe myrtle is buried too deep. If we think back to the picture of the buried root collar, the stem of the tree is designed to be dry. The flare of the tree is designed to stay moist. And the DNA of that part of the tree wants to stay moist and covered with mulch. And the stem of the tree wants to stay dry. Well, what happens is when we put too much mulch right here at the root flare, we create a false root zone. And that false root zone sometimes tricks the tree into thinking, "Oh, I'm supposed to grow another stem here or another sucker here." So a lot of times you can mitigate that by removing excess mulch around the base of the tree. If we're not cutting it properly, we're not making a good cut with a good pair of pruners, hand pruners. You could leave a little stub there, and that little stub is going to sprout because it's an aggressive growing tree. So those are some ways. Some crepe myrtles sucker by species more than others, but usually it's too much mulch around the base and properly cutting the suckers off the first time.
Thank you. We'll stay on the topic of crepe myrtles. How to prune a crepe myrtle Crepe murder, yes or no?
No, always go to jail. Go to jail if you murder a crepe myrtle. The reason we don't perform crepe murder or topping, so that falls under the category of topping. Topping is when we take a stem of a tree and we are cutting it right off and we are topping the stem. Well, what happens is we're creating an open wound and we're creating a scenario where there's going to be lots of growth coming from that open wound. Well, many people like that because all that open wound creates a suckering effect, and the suckering now turns into lots of flowers. And we've now managed the height of the tree, and we've created more suckers that are going to flower. That's fine in the short term. The long term is you're putting the tree under stress, you're removing too much of the crown, and you're creating an open wound that could get insects. Safe to say that throughout all the Carolinas right now is a pest called crepe myrtle bark scale. We had it just in the central part of North Carolina. It expanded down to the coast a couple of years ago, expanded out to Raleigh and Durham. We were the first here in Charlotte to see it. And it actually came from Virginia south and came from Texas. But it is a pest that is going to go after a weak tree. And when you top a crepe myrtle, it's going to create a weak tree. So one, we don't want to invite pests to the tree. But two, when we make that heading cut, and have all those suckers come out of it, if you now allow those suckers to grow, those are all poorly attached, basically codominant stems, where we now have 10 stems coming out of one wound, and we don't have a real dominant limb in that stem. So the dominant stem is really what we want. And we want, so please don't murder your crepe myrtles. Don't top your crepe myrtles. Let's prune them correctly.
Maybe just expand on that just a little bit for anyone who might not know what crepe murdering is. How would you recognize that?
How would I what?
How would someone who's not familiar with it recognize, oh, that crepe myrtle's been crepe murdered?
Crepe myrtle topping looks like a hat rack. So you take a 20-foot crepe myrtle and you cut it down to here. Let me go back. You should not prune your crepe myrtle any limb larger than your thumb. The diameter of your thumb is about the size limb you should be removing from your crepe myrtle or from your crepe myrtle. But if you're taking cuts the size of your wrist, that is now you are topping the tree and creating a large open wound. So if you take this nice, beautiful canopy of a tree, I wish I had one really quickly to throw up here. But if you took this nice canopy and then cut it down to 8 feet, that's crepe myrtle topping. And the reason most people do it, this is not a joke, it's because their neighbor did it. People say, well, my neighbor did it and it's the right thing to do. Well, it's not the right thing to do, and you shouldn't top your crepe myrtles.
There seems to be a number of questions about maples, so let's do that real quick.
Sure.
We have some maples in the Raleigh area. We're told that we have gloomy scale, and I think you touched on this. Is there anything we can do about it, or is it best just to take them down? So at what point would
Yep.
they
So
consider that?
there's no, absolutely don't take it down. There's a good, better, best program for crepe murder. Sorry, you got me going on crepe murder. Gloomy scale. There's a good, better, best. The good plan for gloomy scale is to use a horticultural oil in the dormant season. So sometime after Thanksgiving, put a horticultural oil on it and spray the tree. That is the most effective. The next most effective window is in May, when the armored scale comes out from under its hard shell and can be treated with an insecticide. And there's a handful of products on the market that are very, very effective. So we can spray the tree, which is the good plan. The better plan is to address the root collar, because we see maple trees with so many roots around the base of the tree and girdling roots that the girdling roots end up constricting and cutting off. By species, the maple tree has a lot of adventitious roots at the base, and those are going to choke the tree. So a tree that's under stress from being choked with girdling roots is unhealthy. We talked about unhealthy trees inviting pests. That tree is now going to likely get gloomy scale. The best method is to perform root collar surgery, get rid of all those girdling roots, do a horticultural oil and a treatment in May, and potentially put a growth regulator on the tree. And a growth regulator takes all the energy, brings it into the tree, and allows the tree just to become healthier, and a treatment for probably a couple years. So good, better, best. Don't remove your tree at all. I mean, there's a plan. There's a plan to salvage a tree unless it's just 80% dead. We had a neighborhood that was spending $50,000 a year spraying horticultural oil. And they said, I mean, there was a lot of trees, 4,500 trees. There was $50,000 a year to spray gloomy scale. So finally, after 4 or 5 years of doing this, I said, look, this is the good plan, but the better plan is to do all the root collars of these trees. So you're basically doing preventative maintenance every year and spraying these trees, but it's coming back because the tree is not healthy and it has a root collar problem. So how do we address the root collar problem? I said, look, you need to spend probably $250,000 to address the root collars of all the trees and stop the problem because the tree is unhealthy. So if we make the tree healthier, we won't have to spray the tree. Well, the board decided they were going to cut all the trees down and start over with 4,500 new trees. So it was no longer a problem. But we were constantly doing this. Let's just spray it. Let's just spray it. And let's really figure out what's causing the problem. And it's the roots. As we've talked about a couple of times, the roots of the tree are where the problems really originate from. So maple is a tough species. You have to understand it. And if you have maples in your community or you have maples on your property, just understand there's a cost. There's a cost to having good maples.
That's an excellent segue. So you mentioned maple trees are perhaps poor choices for urban street trees, which we have a lot in the HOA world. Do you have a few all-star choices for urban street trees that would also make the municipal planners happy and cover the canopy requirements?
Oh yeah, black gum. Black gum is a great tree, great, really good tree. You can use there's elms, Chinese elms. Obviously, they grow really laterally, so they're going to cover parking spaces and require a little more trimming. But there's an American, the Patriot series of elm tree. There's Jefferson, Washington, Eisenhower, even Lincoln. But there are some great elm trees that grow upright. From a street tree, you can use some bald cypress, depending on where it's going to be and how close to sidewalks and road edges. There's some bald cypresses in Charlotte that are great street trees. If that's what you're looking for. And you can also use American hornbeams. American hornbeams has a real small crown. They're hard to find in the industry. Ginkgos, American hornbeams are probably hard to find at your local nursery or growers, but they're great street trees and good for urban tolerance.
I mean,
But I wish every architect would just stop using maples for a couple of years. It's great. Hey, we get to treat a lot of trees, take care of a lot of trees that are sick, and I love that opportunity that we have. But I would just rather see the right tree for the right place and something that's healthy and is going to withstand the urban pressures.
I think you touched on this, but they said if they want to plant some trees, is there a North Carolina native tree that you would recommend?
Um, oh boy. Uh, there's not a lot of native trees that qualify as street trees. Native trees have kind of an open growth habit. Maybe a black gum is a native tree. Nilva sylvatica.
Mhm.
Possibly that's a tree that you can use. Well, I see that more and more in probably not street trees, but probably front of a lot of neighborhoods are townhouse neighborhoods that have a limited soil space. They're putting in black gums, and it's got a beautiful fall color. Chinese pistache? No, that's not a native. That's a Chinese cultivar, but there's good trees out there you can use. I'm not up on my native street trees.
Um, and then how do you plan long term for trees planted in the small areas between the sidewalk and the roadways?
Yeah. um,
Or we like to call it the planting strip or the beauty strip or the devil strip.
the beauty strip, the devil strip. There are all sorts of names for that strip. It's a struggle. Most municipalities have regulations now that are requiring sidewalks to be have a subsurface structure that allows roots to go underneath the sidewalk. That I'd say communities that developed within the last 10 years, they all have better requirements for subsurface under your concrete or for your sidewalk. Planting strips should be wider. I mean, I know preaching to the choir here, but they should be wider. They shouldn't be narrow. They shouldn't be skinny. Tree doesn't belong in that spot, but right tree, right place. So put a hornbeam in a skinny place, or put a Chinese pistache, or put a black gum. Don't put a willow oak there. That willow oak, we all know a willow oak or a white oak is going to grow 30 inches in diameter, right? 30 inches in diameter. I didn't even have it on my screen. It's too big. And it's going to outgrow that space. So let's put the right tree in there that's going to survive. But it's an uphill battle for sure.
Um, you must have read the next question. If we have willow oaks planted now, is there a way to maintain them in that street planter?
Yeah, there are. Yep, less grass, more mulch.
Okay.
Less grass, more mulch. We did a study here in Charlotte on Queens Road, and we talked about the willow oaks going down Queens Road, and we determined that some of the failure is caused by the lack of mulching and the lack of fertilization of those trees. We're mowing the grass. So I'll get on my soapbox for just a minute. I know we don't have a ton of time left, but in our perfect landscape world, we all want the landscapers to remove all of our leaves. All of our leaves, we want nice striped lawns. We want the beautiful fairway, Augusta fairway looking front lawn or turf, right? We want a lush green with stripes. Well, what we're doing when we're removing all the leaves is those leaves break down into organic matter. So we want to strip the tree of the decaying matter that it needs for food, and then we're going to fertilize the turf with NPK, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and we're not really going to give the tree any of the need. So we're robbing it of the leaves that are going to break down and become organic matter, and then we're robbing it of the right fertilizer. So we need more mulch around trees. And mulch to the drip line is if you can envision the edge of the tree, and you can't see my hands, but if the edge of the tree where the drip line is, in theory, that should be all mulch. We should have mulch out to there, and we should give up on more of our beautiful striped lawn and give that tree, that mature willow oak, in our yard or in our planting strip, and we should just give up on turf and say, let's put organic matter there, because that's really what that tree needs.
Well, perfect. We are reaching time. I had one other question. This one looks to be a little bit more of a legal question. But if a tree on my land or the association land falls on a neighbor's property or a member's property, is responsible for the damage? That might go to the attorneys.
I am honestly not sure of the South Carolina answer to this question, but the North Carolina answer to this question is where the tree falls is who's responsible. So person A has a tree, it falls into person B's yard. Person B is wholly responsible for cleaning that up. Person A, they're just responsible for what's on the portion of their yard. And that's North Carolina law. It's where the tree falls, and it falls on their responsibility. Now, you get into the true minutia here, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but if you've contacted your neighbor and said, "Hey, I'm worried about your tree. I think it's going to fall on my car," and you tell them that while you're out having a glass of wine in the front yard talking about the kids' day at school, it's probably not going to go anywhere. But if you send a certified letter or you send a read receipt email that says, "Hey, neighbor, politely, I think your tree's going to fall in my yard, and I think you should have it inspected by a professional arborist or a certified arborist." And then there's a pattern. So all of a sudden, that pattern now shows negligence, and the person where the tree falls, you can go back and say, "Look, I've told them for 3 or 4 years now, and here's the proof and here's the evidence." Does it go anywhere? I have no idea. I really don't. That's legal. But where the tree falls is where the responsibility lies. I am certain in North Carolina, and I'm not 100% sure in South Carolina.
Okay. And then do you suggest that neighborhoods fertilize large groves of trees?
Um, I don't necessarily know large groves of trees, and I didn't talk about this when I talked about fertilizer, but young trees need fertilizer because we want them to grow. Those teenage trees that are 15 to 23 years old, they need fertilizer to compartmentalize and just be healthier. But also, mature trees need fertilizer as well. Kind of like we're getting old and my knees hurt in the morning, and I got to take a little bit of anti-inflammatory because my knee hurts. Like we get older and our bodies change. Same with trees. We want trees to be healthy. So what I would probably recommend is if you have a grove of trees, I would probably fertilize the trees that are likely to impact the perimeter. So if that's the perimeter where maybe the bus stop is or the horse barn, I would probably do that. The answer always is to do all trees. But if I hear grove, I'm thinking it's not a very maintained area, lots of organic matter on the ground, lots of decaying matter, lots of food for those trees, which I think is important. But I would probably take the perimeter trees that are near turf, and maybe those will be at the top of my list to do fertilizer for.
Great. There was a question about your contact details. I know we have the QR code here. Did you want to share your contact information with the group?
Yep. So I mentioned this. I'm in Charlotte. One of our commercial arborists here in Charlotte. We have 9 others, and of the 10 other offices that we have a lot of a lot of other arborists throughout the 2 state area, and we operate on a free consultation. So you can go to our website, bartlett.com, and depending on what office you're in and what market you're in, you can go directly on bartlett.com, request an appointment, and you can put in a request there that goes right to our administrative team at the local office. Again, big company, but we want to feel small and local. So we have local admins that answer the telephone in every single office, answer emails, and what we do is we schedule an arborist to come out to your property and perform an inspection at no cost. So probably the easiest way. Bartlett.com, you can certainly request a reservation or an appointment, but my address is Schmidhausler, my last name, at Bartlett.com if you want to contact me directly.
Well, great. Well, thank you all for attending. Quick reminder, the recording for today's session will be uploaded and available to be reviewed anytime at camsmgt.com. That will be under the board member resources section. Along with the past webinars, you also find a variety of other additional education materials, so we encourage you guys to check that out. We appreciate Eric for having a very informative session with us today. We hope you all will join us in October, and we believe we plan to discuss insurance. So thank you all, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.